Hey, how's it going?
Going pretty good, man. Thanks for taking the time. How long do you got? Like 20, 30 minutes right now?
Yeah,
All right,
I
cool.
got a little bit of time.
Let's start with the start. I want to give a little background for the article. I know you're the former Bellator welterweight champion, but tell everybody how you first got your start in MMA.
I mean, my upbringings were pretty rough as far as, growing up in a gangbanging territory full of, a lot of, like gangs and drugs and violence and that kind of stuff, so
Right,
initially my mom,
Spanish
this
Harlem,
is,
right?
yeah, Spanish Harlem, Manhattan. My mom initially wanted to get me to do some kind of activity just to get me out, because she didn't want me to eventually like conform or become part of it because I've been, like basically repelling against, being part of it, joining a gang or getting into drugs or any of that stuff. So she said, why not, try martial arts? And she was like, you know what, I'll do it with you too. I guess it's to motivate me to do it. So initially that's how it started. There was no intention of, fighting, becoming a world champion, like having, a successful career at it. My upbringings in martial arts were very, very humble. It was just for me to get out of a bad area in my life at that time, but I fell in love with it. It was the one thing that made me happy at that point in my life. I grew up with a lot of anger issues and, a lot of circumstances that I lived with at the time, and I didn't really have a lot to look forward to. I feel like I didn't have a future or anything in anything. So, I fell in love with that and that was the end of it, man. From that point on, I religiously trained as if that was, my escape from everything in life, and I guess with that kind of dedication and with that type of, input that I had in my training, it got me to where I am now.
Now, before you got into the full-rounded mixed martial arts, were you doing anything else? Were you doing like boxing or, high school wrestling or anything like that? Or did you just jump straight into full circuit training for MMA?
Just jumped in straight in.
All right.
I didn't have any prior experience or anything.
Cool. So, when you say that there were gangs in Spanish Harlem, I admit I'm a little, unknowledgeable about that area. Was it like Latin Kings, Bloods, Crips? What was it?
Yeah, a lot of Bloods and Crips.
Okay. So, seems like MMA was a good way to go then. And did you know right away when you started training, you said, you devoted yourself to it passionately, but did you feel like, hey, I'm really good at this, I'm just a natural, or was it like a long time before you realized you would be good at being, an MMA athlete?
You know what? One thing that I've always kept, even now to this day, was a sense of non-complacency. I never thought I was that great at it. I guess, very, in a very tunnel vision manner, I trained and just, trained my ass off every single day, just, for me to feel good, and for me to feel like accomplished about, my martial arts. But I didn't step away from the whole thing saying to myself that, wow, like I'm pretty good at this. As a matter of fact, I was very tough on myself. I always was, telling myself like, no, that's no good. I got to get this better. I got to get my punch better. I got to get my, my ground game better. Like I was always tough on myself, when I first started.
Now, was there a specific team that you were training with when you got into MMA early, or was it just you went to the gym, they had MMA there, or, who did you hook up with early on?
I did my share of research, and I went around, visited schools in the city, and there was one school in particular that just did a very, very good job of just making me feel welcomed and part of their family, and, I right off the bat went to Tiger Schulman's. It was on 19th Street in Manhattan at the time. It was just a feeling that I got from when I walked into the school, the way I was greeted. One of the instructors at the school there, who, to this day, I'm still very close to him. He's actually like a close brother of mine. He's the one who got me started. And he taught me my first class, and he like beat the shit out of me in that first class. Like really, like, and I don't mean like him sparring me or like throwing me around. I mean like he was feeding mitts, and he got so into it. I could tell like his passion. He saw something in me I didn't see, and I never trained a day in my life, but I was giving him everything I had, I was physically active. I did a lot of other sports and stuff. So I was able to go pretty far with him. As much as he was giving me, I was able to, assimilate and process any drills he was giving me, and punches or anything, whatever it was that day. I just took it in like a sponge, and he got excited by it, and he just kept throwing more and more at me, and man, it just kicked my ass that day. And I was like, wow, this is intense. I went back home saying, like, I fucking love this, man. Like, this is where I need to be. This is what I need to be doing. It was the only drug that made me feel great. In spite of the drugs that I was surrounded by around where I lived, this was the only true thing that made me feel like I had a sense of meaning, or something that made me have a sense of belonging.
Well, I'd say that drug turned out to be a pretty good addiction, because you ran off 10 straight wins when you turned pro. So, it worked out well for you going early.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I know, and that's, to, credit that to the people that, trained me and my coaches, and, Tiger Schulman's, and, how they really brought me up, and, they brought me up from, being a nobody to something,
And you got in at a time when MMA was exploding on the national scene. It had already been active going all the way back to the early 90s on pay-per-view, but it was really making its breakthrough on TV in the mid-2000s when you were fighting in IFL and Bellator. So how did it feel to be there right as it was getting big nationally?
It felt great, man. I mean, to see it on TV, and then to actually perform and do, very similar things, on my own, made me feel like, that I was capable of doing what those people were doing on TV. So it made me feel like that goal of, that goal is very attainable. I looked at those people on TV like they were gods, like how someone from back in the old ages will look at, gladiators and inside the Coliseum like kings. I looked at fighters in the UFC and in the cage. I looked at them like they were gladiators, like modern day gladiators. I was like, wow, that's what I want to be. That's what I want to do. That feeling that I got from watching them, and that heart that was being poured on in the fights, I wanted to evoke that emotion out of others. I wanted to inspire people, and I wanted to motivate people in the same manner. So when I started doing it, I was like, wow, I can't believe this is actually attainable. This is something that I can actually do.
Now, when I'm looking at your early fight record, there's a lot of good names that you beat very early on, but a name that stands out to me is Mike Dolce. Is that the same Mike Dolce as the Dolce Diet?
Correct.
Wow, what was that like? I've never seen the guy actually fight before. I missed that fight.
What was the fight like?
Yeah, or Mike like, just whatever your memories are of that particular IFL fight.
The fight itself is, to me, just like it were any other fight. I took it very seriously. I didn't know a lot about certain opponents or about, fighters at the time, but I just kind of kept my head down and just focused mostly on my training than I did on the name and the caliber of my opponent. So when I went out there, I was more, kind of like, I was more struck by the fact that I was competing for a pretty known, event at the time, which was the IFL. And, I don't know, man. I look back at it still like, in its glorious days. To me, like, that was like, wow, like my, my steps towards getting into, like a bigger spotlight, for me to actually start doing well and become successful. But then I saw him as a very tough opponent, extremely worthy adversary, and I looked at him, I was like, wow, this is somebody I really trained hard for. So if anything, the caliber of who he was, because he had experience, just motivated me to train extremely hard for him.
You didn't ever cross paths with him again down the road, like you didn't do the Dolce Diet for any of your fights later on, right?
No, I might have hit him up, maybe once, asking him to see if he was able to, kind of help me out for one of the fights as far as tips and stuff, but, never heard back from him, so.
Oh, that's a shame. Well, next time I run into him, I'll be like, hey, give Lyman a call. He was trying to get a hold of you.
No, but I see he's doing extremely well, with his career now. He's helping out a lot of fighters, so he's passing on a knowledge that I feel like is, extremely important for competitors to know. And unfortunately, a lot of fighters actually don't know a lot about, how to cut weight properly and how to eat and diet properly. So he's doing extremely well with that, and, hats off to him for that.
Yeah, in fact, I wanted to ask you about that because it seems lately we've had a lot of main events go out because of guys not making weight, or fights changed to catch weights because guys couldn't make the weight. So your thoughts in general about weight cutting, is it going too far? Are guys like going too far up in weight and cutting down, or is it, like you said, just the diet?
I think, I don't know. I don't know what goes on in the head of a lot of other fighters, because when you have a set date for something, you're dedicated, and everything you exist for is for that date, which means that you do everything within your power to prepare. And I've heard, some crazy stories about competitors going into an event not being prepared, not coming in, ready as far as like their weight, not coming in ready as far as their conditioning, not coming in ready as far as, anything. Every component that leads up to the fight and leads up to a victory is extremely crucial, and it's very important to focus on. So when I hear that there are fighters that miss weight, and by a lot too, that it's disappointing. It's not only that, but I feel like it's also disrespectful to the opponent, who's, obviously been training very hard and is working his ass off for him to make the weight and to do everything right.
Right. It's never like both guys miss the weight. It's always one guy that misses way over and the other's right on.
Yeah, exactly.
So somebody put in the work and somebody didn't. But of course, fighters will always say things like, I had the flu, I wasn't feeling well, I pulled a muscle, I sprained something. Well, yeah, maybe you shouldn't have taken the fight then. Did you ever take a fight where you didn't feel like you were ready or at 100%, or have you always been like, if I'm not ready, I'm not taking this fight?
Sometimes I'm a little too tough for my own good, and I have put myself out there, far less than 100%. I fought one time with pneumonia. I had walking pneumonia for one of my fights, and it was 2 weeks prior to the fight, actually, and I was still training through it, and I fought with it as well. I've had fights where I've been injured. That goes to say that I don't think there's any fighter that does go out there 100%, considering how hard they train over the course of 3 months.
Right.
But as far as really something that's going to affect winning a fight, I don't think I would put myself out, and put myself out there in a position where I could potentially lose. But then again, it's hard. It's hard for me, and I can attest to that personally. And I could say the same about any other fighter that's tough, because they're going to say the same thing. They're like, no, I train my ass off. I'm not going to let, a flu get in the way, or I'm not going to let, something get in the way of me achieving this win.
Or if it's
so I kind of see both sides of the story. I do see what you mean, because why are you going to put yourself out there? And, I don't know.
Right. And
I'm sorry, what are you saying?
Oh, I was just going to say, there are some opportunities that are just too big. Like Daniel Cormier, knowing that his knees are in rough shape, he still wants that fight with John Jones next year. He's not willing to give it up and let somebody else get that shot ahead of him.
Right.
Sometimes you take a fight just because the opportunity is there, and you got to take it while it's available. But going back to your own career, I mentioned that you went undefeated your first 10 fights. You won the Bellator welterweight title, and then the very first person you faced to defend the title was Ben Askren. That had to be frustrating, because Askren is known for frustrating a lot of fighters.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah, so he likes to pick the ankles. He likes to hold people on the ground. I've been to a couple of his title fights, in fact, where he's just made the crowd so mad they booed him the whole time. But were they booing Ben in the building that night
during my fight?
Yeah,
are you asking?
When you fought him in Philadelphia.
To be honest, I channel out a lot of the crowd and the noise. I'm trained to listen to my corners, so. Right. So maybe, but I also had it was very close to home, if I'm correct. But anyways, I had a lot of people that I brought. I had a big home crowd, so obviously they're gonna, they were rooting for me. And at certain points where he had, he had the vantage point, or he was, in a position like on a mound, or he was holding me down, he was getting booed. But that's goes without saying again, because I had a home crowd with me, so I had a very strong support system. They all come out and they wanted me to win, obviously. So,
Right, and whatever you could say about that fight, he didn't beat you. It went the full 5 rounds to a decision, but he didn't knock you out. He didn't submit you. So you gave him
No,
everything you could in that fight.
absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to go out without a fight. You know, if someone's going to beat me, they're going to have to go through hell in order to do that. You know, and I did the best I could. There's nothing I could really say as far as having any regrets about the fight because I fought the best, you know, and to this day he's still, you know, very recognized. He's, you know, making a name for himself in spite of whether people, you know, they like his style or not. I mean, you still have to give the guy respect for the fact that he's able to come into another sport off of, you know, where all he's done his whole life is wrestle and, you know, impose his will on others who are, you know, they're world renowned as well. And he's become champ at doing it. So you got to give, you know, some respect for him for that as well.
Yeah, pretty much any organization he's gone to, he's become a champion just off the strength of his wrestling. I think UFC is kind of afraid of him for that reason. They feel like if they brought him in, he might make their guys look bad. You never know. But hey, speaking of which, you fought in IFL, you fought in Bellator, you've got this upcoming CFFC pay-per-view, but have you ever thought of UFC? You know, I know you got a tryout for Ultimate Fighter, but have you ever gotten any other calls or called them? Anything besides that?
My management have been back and forth with the UFC, but I'm not, at the moment, not focused on that.
Right, of course.
I have something, you know, I'm very much engaged and, you know, I'm very focused at the task at hand. I'm thinking about next Saturday and that's all I'm worried about right now. Not thinking about any other opportunities yet.
Well, that's again your focus, your tunnel vision, your staying on course. And since we're focusing on that, let's talk about Jonavin Webb. I know you said that sometimes with your opponents, you just want to go in there and you know, if you don't know them, you'll know them by the end of the fight. But at the same time, I'm sure at this point in your career, you've probably done a little bit of scouting, so maybe you know more about Webb than some of your other opponents in the past.
Right.
I don't want you to give away anything. I don't want him to listen to this and get ideas, but you're feeling confident about fighting him next Saturday.
I'm extremely confident. I'm motivated by the fact that he is the current champ. The champion or not, I will still fight him exactly the same, whether he has a strap around his waist or not, because he's an opponent. He's somebody standing in my way. And I know he's, you know, dedicated in the same cause and he's hungry. You know, he's young. You know, he's very motivated as well. And that's why I feel that this is going to be a great fight because these are two people who are really, really devoted, dedicated, motivated, and they want that win bad. So I'm ready to go out there and do exactly that.
Yeah, and it's going to be available in a lot of different ways. It's on in demand for cable. It's on GoFightLive.tv. So there's going to be a lot of exposure for this fight for both of you.
Yes.
Now, since we can't talk about, you know, the scouting of him and reveal any secrets, let's talk more about what you're doing in your training. You know, I'm sure you've got everything focused, but is there like, you know, anything you think that you've improved on greatly since like your last fight with Matt Secor?
I mean, a lot of it has to do clearly with working on, you know, strengthening like my ground game and with wrestling. So I've been doing a lot of that, you know, mostly a lot of wrestling and polishing a lot of, you know, my stand-up just because, you know, I feel like I'm comfortable with my stand-up doesn't mean that I completely abandon it and don't work on it because, like I mentioned before, I'm never complacent and I always feel I can be better and better and better at anything. So, obviously for this specific fight, considering the opponent, I've been working a lot on, you know, my wrestling and my ground game as well. So.
Yeah, and that makes sense because Webb is a protege of Daniel Gracie. So, again, not giving away anything, but people can look that up. That's public knowledge. So you got to figure anybody that trains with a Gracie is looking to go to the ground.
Of course. He's someone who seems very confident and he's, you know, like I said, he's young, he's hungry. So I don't expect him to just, you know, want to fight me in any one particular area only. You know, I always assume that a fighter, especially of his caliber, is going to want to get better and better. So I'm ready for the fight to be in the ground, whether it's takedowns or whether it's in a stand-up position. You know, I've trained extremely hard for this fight, and I'm prepared for any position or anything that this fight's going to come, anywhere this fight ends up.
Now, you mentioned before that a lot of family and friends will come to your fights when they're on the East Coast. So knowing that this is in Atlantic City, I'm sure you've got a big contingent coming for this one as well.
Yeah, we definitely do. That, and it's also have my training partner Jimmy Rivera. We're from the same team. He's also fighting for the title as well. So we're definitely bringing a lot of people coming.
All right.
Definitely going to be a home crowd for us.
All right. Yeah, I see. Yeah, he's fighting Anthony the Death Dealer Gennaro. That's a hell of a nickname, the Death Dealer.
Yeah. Yeah, I love these nicknames.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on MMA nicknames in general? Because some of them are pretty good. I mean, yours, you've been called Cyborg, but a lot of other guys, you get these really wacky names. And
Yeah.
I just think to myself, why would you want to go out for a fight and have people laughing?
I don't know, man. I mean, it's at the end of the day, in spite of it being a fight and, however a fighter perceives the sport, you still have spectators, and spectators need to have that person that they either root for or that they're against. There has to be that sense of, liking someone and disliking someone. So I think it's great for that. I think it's cool to have like nicknames and, like serious ones or funny ones. It kind of adds a little of a personality to the sport.
That's fair. Yeah. And, with Cyborg, did you come up with that yourself, or was that something your teammates gave you?
No, it definitely wasn't a self-proclaimed nickname. It was just because of might actually be around the time that I had that walking pneumonia and I was training for it that I got that name, because I was still kind of like, mechanical almost about my training and my movement, very robotic. Like I wouldn't show that I was in pain or anything, when clearly I was. Every time I was, doing something, it felt like I had like, shards of glass in between my joints, because I was just aching from so bad from having pneumonia, but I still trained through it and, with a stone face. And one of the instructors, he started calling me that. And then, we're a pretty large organization. We have 50 other locations and schools. And, it kind of spread the word around. That started a seed. And then now to this day, I'm just go Cyborg. I never said no to it, so it just stuck. I was like, okay, whatever.
Well, it's certainly not.
It's not the most original nickname, but
well, there's less.
I guess
original.
It's just more true to form as far as the nickname kind of defining how I train. Very like no matter what, I still press forward. I'm like a machine. That's kind of the idea, I guess, when he came up with that nickname.
Well, yeah, and there might be 2 or 3 other people named Cyborg, but there's like 12 or 13 other people named Pitbull, so it's still a little less common than Pitbull.
Yeah.
The next time I see a new fighter I've never seen before come out as Pitbull, I'm going to tweet him and I'm going to say, change your name, come on.
Hope you don't feel that way about me, though.
No, not at all. In fact, before we wrap this up, I'm sure that people who want to follow, get ready for your fight next Saturday, they want to follow you on social media and keep up with you. So go ahead and give out those handles for everyone.
Absolutely. On both Facebook and on Twitter and on Instagram, you could find me under Lyman Good. Okay. Also, I teach at a school in downtown Manhattan under Tiger Showman's Chelsea. So if anybody's within that area or is looking to get in some training, I'm definitely available. I have a school that I just opened up about 3 months ago, and I'm excited to train people and get them up, into shape. What else? And that's it. People want to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. It's all under Lyman Good.
All right, very good. Well, Lyman, I wish you the best of luck fighting Jonavin Webb next Saturday. It's on GoFightLive.tv and on in-demand pay-per-view, so I hope a lot of people are watching, and I hope you do well in the fight.
Thank you very much, Steven. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate your time.
No problem. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.